Have you ever thought about how conflict shows up in your workplace and what your style is and why sometimes you get frustrated with other people on your team and how you express that frustration? That's what we're going to explore today.
And so we're looking specifically at the Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Model. They identified 5 approaches to conflict. So let's take a look at each of the 5. The first one, these are in no particular order, is avoiding. You ignore the issue altogether. Maybe you even put your head in the sand a little bit, but you're choosing not to deal with the issue at that moment. Or you're staying completely neutral. The next approach then is accommodating. And accommodating is when you are choosing to let the other person have their way because you don't want to rock the boat. Third, competing. This is when you want to win the argument. When there are 2 people, person A comes in with option A, person B comes with option B, and you are debating, arguing which option is going to win. You don't want to give in. You don't want the other person to win either. The next one then is collaborating. So if competing looked at option A and option B, when you take the collaborating approach, you're not only looking at option A and B, but also C and D and E and F and all the different possibilities and options in order to find the best solution. The final approach then is compromising. And compromising it's less time consuming than collaborating. And essentially what you're doing with compromising is you're just resolving the issue. What's the middle ground? What can we do to just resolve the issue and move on? So those are the 5. And when people hear these, there is a tendency to think, oh, this one's always good. We should always collaborate, or we should never compete. We should never avoid. The reality is there's a time and place for all 5 approaches.
And it's funny because I remember when I worked for Senator Cole, he used to say, if nobody is happy, then you probably have compromised. And so when you look at these 5 different approaches to conflict, they fall in a continuum. And so on the x-axis, if you look at cooperativeness going from low to high, and then the y-axis, I was a math major, is assertiveness going from low to high, you can see that they all have a different place on this continuum. So if you are low on cooperativeness and low on assertiveness, chances are you're avoiding. You're avoiding it altogether. And we're going to talk next about when each of these might be beneficial to use. If you are high on cooperativeness, but low on assertiveness, you're accommodating. That's my default. Growing up, I don't like conflict at all. I've had to really work to strengthen that muscle. So I just want to be cooperative and it's okay. You can win. I'm fine to lose if it means I don't have to get into it. I've learned that is not always the best approach. On the other side, if you're high on assertiveness and low on cooperativeness, you're competing. Maybe that's your default and you have no problem with that and you're going to win at all costs. It doesn't matter who is losing. And then right in the middle cooperativeness, middle assertiveness is compromising. And then finally, if you are high on cooperativeness and high on assertiveness, so you really want to find the win-win, that's about collaborating.
And again, there is a time and a place for each of these approaches. So the idea here is not to try to debate which one's good and which one's bad. The challenge is to determine which approach is best for the situation that you're finding yourself in. And honestly, if this is a concept you can discuss with your team members so that you can get on the same page when you are having a conflict, all the better. So let's get specific on when is the best time and place for each of these approaches. Starting with avoiding. When you need to delay the conversation, it's good to avoid. No need to get into it with other people. If it's not the time and place, it's not a bad option to avoid the conflict, knowing that you're going to come back to it later. Or if the outcome doesn't affect you. If it's not your fight, don't get involved. There's no need to get involved into the conflict.
Yeah, and I'll add in there, I think the key here is that it's a conscious choice, that it's not avoiding it by default because there's, fear, or I don't want to rock the boat, or I don't want to say anything, but choosing and saying, okay, we're in a client meeting. I'm disagreeing with Jill. This is not the place for me to tell her I disagree with her. I'm going to avoid that in the moment to talk about it at a better time.
The next one then is accommodating. When's the best time to take an accommodating approach? When you don't care what happens. And truly, you have to not care. It's not the, oh, I don't care, when in fact you do care. But when it doesn't matter, green or yellow, doesn't matter. Thai food or Indian food, doesn't matter. Do we pitch this client or this client? Doesn't matter. If you truly don't have an opinion or feel strongly one way or the other, that's the time to accommodate. Let the other person have their way.
And there are times with my team where I'll give my opinion and I'll say, here's what I think. Like, they'll present something. I'm like, wow, I love that work. This is what I think. And doesn't really matter to me because whatever direction you go is going to be amazing. So I don't have skin in the game. I think whatever it is, so I'll just accommodate and let them make the decision. It's not that I don't care. Like, I don't care. But it's really something that is not high stakes, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe it's less that you don't care as much as you're indifferent. You just don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. Okay, so when do you take the competing approach? When the outcome is most important, that's when to take the competing approach, recognizing that competing approach does have an impact on relationships.
And we were doing sorry, Jill. We were doing a workout in the Thoughtfully Fit gym, and somebody said, this, when there's a safety issue and I know it's a safety issue and the other people don't, that's when the outcome is important. I go in from that competing approach because it's critical.
The collaborating approach, then, that's the one, as we said, that takes the most time. And so when both the outcome and the relationship is important, that's when you're going to take the time to find that best option. And so it not only builds trust within the relationship, you really do get to the best option when you take the time to explore all the different possibilities and the perspectives. Now, while that is ideal, it's also not always practical. And there might not be as much concern about the solution, right? Not everything requires a collaborative approach. And so again, being thoughtful and intentional about what approach you're taking. The final one then of this compromising approach, when is this most important? When the relationship's more important than the outcome. So you might have noticed the track there, right? When competing, if the outcome's most important, compromising when the relationship's most important. And so when a decision just needs to be made and you want to prioritize the relationship over the outcome, that's then when you take that compromising approach.
So we invite you to really think about which of these is your default, which do you do best, and which one is the hardest for you, and be able to engage your core, your thoughtfully fit core, in the moment, to pause and to think, how much do I care about this? How much is the outcome more important, or the relationship, or both? How much time do I have? And that with the awareness that you have from thinking and asking those questions, that you act and you choose the approach that's best for the situation. This is very powerful when you can be thoughtful on how you are approaching conflict instead of just using your default, sometimes unconscious reaction in the moment. And this is what we do. We work with organizations and teams and managers and leaders to be able to have healthy, productive conflict. Because when you just default to avoiding conflict, it shows up later, it pops up. And that's when there's triangulation, there's post-meeting meetings. That's when toxic cultures occur. Same thing, if your organization has a high competition, those are organizations we work with where we see that there's a lot more turnover. So being able to bring this to your team is a powerful skill that we love to work with you and organizations. So feel free to reach out if you want to explore what this could look like. Thank you so much for joining us.